We're talking about what is class and what is object, and how do we create the object, and what are the different ways of creating the object. Okay, so that we have discussed, and today we'll be discussing about the which are basic and important. Okay, I'm just sharing my notepad. Okay, so here today we'll be discussing about like what is static, what is instance. Under the static we have like static variables, and we have static methods, and static keyword itself, and static blocks, and how do we apply static to the inner classes. Okay, so inner classes is little tricky now. If I try to explain it now, you don't understand, but we'll try on the inner classes also. And instance blocks, we'll see instance blocks and instance variables. Okay, so what are those instance blocks and instance variables? Instance variables and methods. In that we have like different set of methods that we are going to discuss. Okay, so first and foremost thing, the important thing is like, so why do we need to use the static, and what is the use of when we use the static, how does it exactly work in terms of memory? Okay, so that we are going to discuss. So for this, I'm going to just create a package for okay. Okay, I've just created Oops Basics. In that, I'm going to create a class, create static instance examples. Okay. First, let's try to understand what is static and why do we need to use the static. Okay. So if we go programmatically, okay, internally, how does it exactly happens? How does it exactly happens? Okay. So here, yesterday we spoke about like what is JVM. We have a class loader. Okay, so memory management. Then we have like memory management. Okay, memory allocation or memory management. Then after we have like execution engine. Okay, so first what it does is like whenever it looks into the class, then it's going to go to this class loader, and here in the class loader it's going to provide some kind of like all the class members. Okay, so members in the sense it will be like it will be like reading all the data from this particular class. That's the class. When the class loads, then it's going to get all the details of that particular class. Okay, so then we have like methods. Okay, static variables or static context. Anything is like static context. So here in the memory allocation, so we have like heap memory. So this heap memory, what it does is like it's going to allocate memory to the instance variables and all the instance whatever we are defining as part of class, like class, object. Okay, so here it gets the memory. Okay, class gets the memory. So after that, execution engine is like JIT compiler will take care of like execution. So we have some native methods. So those native methods will be taken. Okay, so few other things. Okay, so when it's going to consider this native methods and JIT compiler, so it will execute the program. Now you see that here we have a static. Okay, so static in the sense whenever the class gets loaded. Okay, class loaded. At the time of class loading, the static variable, whatever we have like static context. Okay, so if I'm talking about like static context, so everything whatever we are defining as part of the class. Okay, static. So which in terms of like static, that will get this memory. Okay, so memory in the sense it will get loaded. Okay, so that is the reason why you see that public static void main that we are writing, right? So whatever we are writing as part of like a main method. Okay, so before creating the object, so this particular piece of method will get the memory. Okay, so JVM, because we are defining this one as like public static void main. Okay, if someone asks you about like why do we need to define public static void, I mean, what is the use of this? Okay, so whenever we are creating or else whenever we are loading the class, so there itself like static context will get the memory. That's the thing, but they will get invoked. Okay, so they will get invoked. So what exactly happened in internally is like first when we are trying to load the class, it will first check for the static context. Whatever is defined as like static, that will get invoked. I mean to say that in the class area, it will get some kind of a space. Okay, so now JVM understands that if we are defining something as like a static, that in that case, JVM will allocate some space or some memory for that. Okay, so it will get some kind of like space wherein it will start triggering. Okay, so before object is created. So when do we create the object? After class is loaded. If you are trying to create, for example, we have like class name, reference variable is equals to new class name. Okay, now what it does is like it's going to create the object for this particular class. Okay, so when do we get it? During the memory allocation. In the heap memory, we'll get some space. Okay, internally, how does it exactly work? Is like this is a heap memory, and whatever we are going to have the reference variable. For example, this is like method area, the area that variables will be stored. Okay, so now you see. So here, if I'm creating, what is that reference? I'm going to create a reference. So what is the space that I'm going to get for this class? Is like here is the some space that I'm going to get. Okay, this reference variable is pointing to this particular object. So this is nothing but it is creating some space for this particular class. Okay, so but in case of static, it's like kind of we get some space. So we have like preliminary space, all this we say, but generally what happens is like internally it will provide some space in the heap memory. Okay, so after some versions of Java, like after after this 16 and 17, then what they did is like actually they tried to move this preliminary area wherein we used to have some special memory allocated for the static variables. Now it is moved to the heap memory. Okay, so it is like kind of a debate which is happening, but still people say that the static variables will be allocated in the some space is allocated in the heap memory. Okay, but when does the static variables or static context get loaded? Whenever we are triggering the class. I mean to say that when the class is loaded, there itself we are going to get the we are going to get to see this static context is loaded. Okay, so this static context does not require any object to be called. Okay, so whenever we are creating any set of variables, methods, nested classes, or else static blocks, we don't need object for them. Okay, directly we can call with the help of a class name because it is related to the class, not to the object. Okay, not to the object. So let's go here. Now try to create. So that is the reason why you see that initially I've just created some methods with static, right? Some variables with the static. Okay. So here you see, if I put a is equals to 10, if I'm trying to print the value of a, so what it says, now you see, it's throwing the error because cannot make a static reference to the non-static field. Okay, we'll talk about this. Now I'm going to make it as like a static variable. Okay, so static, the static things. Okay, the static things. Whenever we define anything as like static variable, method, static blocks, or nested classes, static nested classes only can be called within the static context. Okay, why do we need to call them as like static? Why do we need to call the static variables or static members within a static? Is like we don't need object for this. Okay, we don't need object for this. For example, you see, if I directly try to call this particular variable without creating the object, then what it says like change it to static, create a new instance of object, print string, or surround with try catch box. Okay, so this is nothing but these are the issues that we are going to get. Okay, so now you see when I try to create an object for this class, I try to create an object for this class. Now you see, I'm just going to create an object, sample, new. Now I need to access. These are like non-static, right? These are like non-static. So that is the reason why we need to create an object for this. If we specify this one as like a static, then we don't need. Then we don't need this particular object, but it is like we can still access, but we don't need it. Okay, so it says like you can see the static field, static instance should be accessed in the static way. Okay, that's nothing but we need not to use this object directly. When you execute this, it's going to print the value of a. Okay, now you can see here. Okay, so likewise, I'll give the examples. Now you see, we have some set of records. Like for example, I want to store student details. Okay, student name, saying student, branch, string, student, college. Okay, so another one is like I'll take int st underscore id. Now you see, student name can be different, student ID can be different, student branch can be different, but college is like if the same college, if we are specifying some case, same college, okay, some college, we can call it as like some CBIT. Okay, so this remains same for the students. Okay, branch can be something EC, triple E, or metallurgy or something mechanical, but the college remains same. Okay, so here you see we have a student ID. So this can be like varying. This can be like varying. This can be like varying, but this will remain same. So for this reason, what we do is like we are going to make it as like a static. Okay. So before getting into this, I'll just take one of this counter and I'm going to create multiple objects on that. Okay. So static will not change the behavior for a different set of objects that we are creating for a class. Okay. So let me take a count here. Just going to take the count is equals to 0. Now what I'm going to do is like I'll just create a sample small method. Okay, don't worry about what is the method at all. So public void, I need to make it as like static. Okay, let me just create a simple constructor otherwise. Okay, so I'll create a constructor. Don't worry about this constructor. So we'll discuss in detail. Okay, so now I'm going to do a counter plus and I want to print the count. Okay, so let me just comment this and we'll discuss about these things little later. Okay, so let me just comment. So if something is like not changing, we make it as like static. Okay, so which is like which does not change its behavior. It does not change its behavior for the different objects. So in that case, we are going to make it as like a static. So here I've just created a constructor. Constructor is like a class name. Okay, so class name and I have a piece of a code here. So which I need to print. So now I'm going to create a main method and I'll create an object. Okay, sample. So this is like first I'm going to discuss about non-static. Okay, when we are not making this one as like a static and I'm trying to create. So here, let's go and execute. Okay, so I've created one object. Now I'll execute it. What is the value of count? So it is like count plus. Okay, so 1 is the count value. Okay, because it is like when we are creating the object, so directly it will go to the constructor call. It will just execute this piece of code. So what is the count that we got? We got 1. Likewise, I'm going to create 4 different objects. Okay. So if it is like non-static, if it is like an instance, okay, this is nothing but an instance variable, and this instance variable will be called within this constructor. Okay, constructor is like a piece of a code. It will execute something. Okay, so whenever we are creating this object, constructor will be kind of like a it's kind of like a keyword that we are going to use, like class name with the open and closed parentheses. Okay, so here what it is like open and closed bracket. So it's going to just create a constructor. Okay, so now, so for the first time when I created the object and I'm just calling the constructor, this constructor will execute. Okay, so this constructor is like different for different objects. You see, sample 1, sample 1, sample 2, sample 3. Now I execute this code. I get all this, like all the variable values of the count. Okay, variable value of the count will be like 1, because it's like instance variable is like whatever the variable that we are defining as like non-static, and if it is an instance variable, it will change its behavior. It's like separate object. Okay, separate object, like it will behave separate for the different objects that we are creating. Okay, so it's mean like its behavior will be changing for object to object. Okay, now you see what I'm going to do is like I'm going to make it as like a static. Okay, so I just made it as like a static. Okay, so let's go and try to execute it. See what is happening now? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. The static variable does not change its behavior for each and every object that we are defining as part of class. But in case of instance variable, it has a different behavior for different objects. Okay, so this count is whatever we are defining for this object, it will remain only within the scope of this object. Okay, so it will change for this. I mean to say that again, it will reset its value to count 0 for this object. Okay, and after calling this particular constructor, it's going to increment its value. For this object, it will again change its value. That's nothing but it will again reset its value count is equals to 0. For this object, it will reset its value count is equals to 0. But in case of static, it will.
Oh, okay.
Any doubts?
Awesome.
Yeah, Mahesh, do you have any doubts? Okay, so here in this case, what is happening is like whenever we are creating a static variable, it will get the memory space. Only one time allocation will be done for that particular variable. Okay, so memory will be allocated only one time for this. But in case of objects, whatever objects that we are creating, these objects will get a separate spaces. Okay, so separate memory spaces. But in case of static members or static variables, static methods or static blocks will get only memory allocation will be done only once. Okay, so that is the reason why if you have something which is not changing, for example, see now college name is not changing, so I made it as like a static because I don't want to keep on adding something. For example, if you have one student, that is fine. If you have like thousands of students, then what is the point of creating n number of variables or creating or using the multiple memory allocations for this particular college name, which is not changing anytime. Okay, this is constant and it's not changing. So in that reason, what we do, we make it as like a static. Okay, now you see what I'm trying to do is like I've just created a constructor and I'm trying to increment it. When I don't make this one as like a static variable, and if it is like instance variable, it will get a separate memory allocation for every object that we are creating. But in case of static, the memory is allocated only once, and it will not change its behavior for different objects that we are creating as part of classes. Okay, so this is the static. Okay, so this is like static. So when the static members will be loaded, when the class is loaded. Okay, when the class gets loaded, there we are going to see this static member loaded. But when the objects will be created, where the objects will be created, and when do we get these objects created for the class? So when we are within this main method, we are creating an object. But you see, static is like different. Okay, so static is like different. Whenever we are executing the program, when the class gets loaded, static will get some space. I mean to say that static variables or static members will get loaded. Okay, but in case of object, it's like in a different. When we look into this memory management here, you see, so here in the memory allocation, in the heap memory, that we are going to get some space. I mean to say that it's get invoked. Okay, objects, when we are creating the objects, all the spaces will be allocated for that particular object in the memory allocation. But in class loading, the first thing is like class members will be loaded, but the static, whatever we are calling it as like static, that will be taken as like a priority before any of these instance variables or instance members or objects. Okay, so this is like static variables, and we'll look into the static blocks, and then we talk about like what is instance block. After that, we look into the static methods and okay, static methods and all. Are you clear with this, guys?
Yes, Shrikant.
Okay, yeah. So now you see, I'm going to create some instance block. How do we create the instance block? Within the class, just use these blocks. Okay, just open and close brackets. So these are nothing but instance block. So here I am typing something. This is instance block. Okay. See, after this, I'm going to create a static block. Now we'll see that sequence of execution, how these things will be executed. Static block. Okay. For this static block, we don't need object, but instance block, we need a object. Okay. So only this instance block will be called when we create the object. Okay. If you are not creating the object, see. Just I have a main method. Okay. Now you see, I'm trying to execute this. This is static block. Okay. So static block is like when the class gets loaded, we are going to see that we are going to get some space for the static blocks or static members. Okay. So because the reason is like these things will be loaded when the class is loaded. But you see that instance variables are instant blocks or instance variables are not yet accessed now. The reason is like we did not create object. Okay. So now you see I'm creating the object. Now you see the sequence of execution. So what is happening? This static block is first executed. Okay. So this is executed. After that, instance block is executed. After that, the constructor is called. Okay. Constructor is called. And here you can see this piece of code is executed. That's the thing about system out dot println. Okay. So count. So this is the thing, but it's going to execute its value. Okay. So this is like static blocks. Directly what you need to do is like you need to use a static keyword and you have to write this inside the static blocks. Okay. If you don't write anything here, now what happens? This will not be treated as like a static. Okay, block is like static keyword along with the two open and close parentheses. Okay, flower brackets that we have. Instance block is like directly you can give like instance blocks like open and close parentheses inside that you can write anything. Okay, but instance blocks will be invoked only after creating the object. Okay, so internally what happens is like now instance blocks. So this is nothing but the object is created. So instance block first they will be called. But static will have some separate spaces. Okay. So I meant to say that here we have kind of a separate space for that. So this piece of space will be allocated for the static blocks. Okay. So this is nothing but we call it as like a class area. So this is heap memory. This is stack. Okay. Stack memory is like all the references will be stored. Okay. All the references what we are trying to put in like from the class on the basis of on the basis of class that will be stored in stack memory. So here it is kind of like an object and it is like a static variables will be stored in the class area. Okay. So this is static block and this is instance block. This is static variable. Okay. This is static variable. So whatever we are defining is like static variable. So after this, we have a constructor. Okay. So don't worry about this constructor. Just I thought like I can write the piece of method, but I just want to explain it in a different way. Okay. So this is like static and instance examples. Okay. So let's go to the other class and try to create some methods. Now you see that we have a basic method that is nothing but public static void main string and the arguments. Okay, this is a main method. Okay, so what is the syntax of main method? This is access modifier, this is a keyword, and this is a return type, and this is a method name, and these are the arguments. Okay, so these are the arguments. What is the basic syntax of any method is like access modifier. We'll discuss about access modifiers, and then we can use any keyword. Okay, so this is like it's a keyword that we can use. What are the keywords that we can use is like we can use static, final, abstract. There are a lot of keywords. Okay, so this is optional. Okay, this is optional, and here return type. So we should have a return type defined definitely for method. Okay, so this is method name, and we say that parameters. So this is the along with the block. Okay, so whatever code you want to write here, statements. Okay, what is method? What is method is it's a piece of a code. Okay, so block of a code that we are writing are for some purpose. Okay, so for example, I want to display some details of this particular student. Okay, so what I'm going to do is like I'll just take. We have already defined this example, right? I'm going to cut it down here, paste it. Now I want to display the details of this particular student. Okay, let me remove the static, discuss about static. Now I want to display the details of this particular student. Then what I'm going to do is like I'm going to create a method called public. Public is like it's wider scope. It can be called from anywhere. Okay, so public void display. So I don't have any parameters to supply. Just I want to print the details of the student. Okay, this is like basic method. Name of the student. Here we did not define the name, so I'm going to give the name here is like name is equal to ID is equal to 1 to 3. Yes. The purpose of this method is to display the details of the student. Now we have created the method. Okay. The purpose of this method is to display the details of the student. So for that reason, what I've defined the method is like public void display. How do I call this method? So this is like non-static. We need an object for this. Okay. When we are trying to access any of the class members, which is non-static, then we have to create an object. Okay. So here I'm just creating an object, method example, class name, meth, and the method example. Okay. Now you see method dot, let's say display. You can see this display method is called. Okay. Now go and execute this. We got the details of the student. Okay. So what is the purpose of this method? This method is to display the details of the students. Okay. Whatever we have defined as part of this particular instance variables, I'm just using them and I'm calling them within this method. Okay. So now it's like I want to return something. Okay. I want to return something. So how do I return now? So there are methods is like method. The purpose of method is to have the piece of code. Okay. We can write some logic inside that. Okay. So for example, now there are two variables. Okay. Let me take another example also. Another class. So you got it right. How do we define the method? This is like basic syntax, access modifier, return type, and method name, and we have a parameters. Okay, so now we have just defined this basic method like public void display, and we did not have any parameters or any return type. Now we are going to see the examples with return type, with parameter, without return type, with parameter. So likewise, we'll see different methods. Okay, so I just want to show you like a basic method here. Now I'll take the example with different set of methods. Now there are some variables defined. Okay, 10 a is equals to 10, b is equals to 20. Okay, and I want to store the value in C. So what are those variables that I have defined within the class is like these are instance variables. Okay, so now I'm going to use, or else I'm going to create a method to do some calculations. Okay, public void sum. Okay, C is equals to A plus B. System And just say out dot println. So I just want to print some content here. Okay. I'm performing some calculations and I want to print this value. So again, here I'm going to take some other method and this subtraction a minus b. Okay, so these are very basic methods. So I do not define them as like static. I don't have any return type. I don't have any parameters. So here to call them, I need to create object for this. Where do I need to create the object? I need to create the object inside the main method. Okay, so why do we need to create within the main method? Because JVM will look for that particular main method and from there it will start the execution. Okay, so math dot sum. Subtract. Okay. See, it is calling this method and it is going here and it is trying to perform some action. After that, it is printing the value. Okay, so it is also same. Now, the thing is like, now I want to supply these things as like a kind of a parameters. Okay, kind of a parameters. How can I do this? And right, this one is like without return type and params. Okay, so now I'm going to take them. I'll just change the name of this sum1 sub1. Okay, now I need to access whatever the values I have here. Okay, so during calling this, I want to just pass them as like a parameter. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is like I'll say int sum e comma int sum d. Okay, so here I'm going to pass it. Let us take like int a or b. Okay, so something like that. So this values, whatever values that I am just trying to perform some actions on them, I'm taking them as like a parameter. Okay, so this is like method with parameters. A method with parameters. So when I send this value, okay, when I just pass this parameters during the method call, okay, so then only it will do some set of actions on them. Okay, that's nothing but it will take the values and it will perform the operations. Okay, now you see we have sum1, sum. Both are the methods which are available. Sum does not accept any values here. Okay, so it's not, we need not to pass any arguments, but here we need to pass the arguments. Now I'm supplying the arguments like 10 or 20 comma 30. Okay, so when I execute this, now you see the difference here, we got the 50. So what is happening, this particular method is asking for the parameters here. Okay, so that's nothing but I'm supplying these parameters and it is asking parameters here, taking them consideration, and it's like executing this particular. This is nothing but the logic it's supplying. Okay, now here also I just want to, can I pass the values of this, like, can I pass this instance values here in case of like method calling? Yes. Can we do it? We'll see. So what is happening here, we have to make them as like a static, otherwise we cannot use them. Okay, anyways we have created the method. I'm just passing those values with the help of the method. Okay, now go and execute it. Now you see -10. Okay, so what we did, so this is like without return type and parameters. So here with return type and without params. Okay, guys, just give me a second. Someone is at my door. I'm just coming back. Yeah, I'm back, guys. So here now you see that with sorry, this is like, I'm sorry for this. I did not tell without return type with params. Okay. So now you see this is without return type. We are not returning anything. This is void is nothing but we are not returning anything. Okay. So now we'll see with return type without params. Okay. So without parameters. Now you see just not accepting any value here. I will take it as like 2 sub 2 here. Here also I'm not accepting. But here I am returning something. Okay. For example, say I'm performing some actions here. I'll comment this code. I just want to return some value. Okay. So I'm performing C is equals to A plus B. But I want to see the result of C. Then what I can do here with return type in the sense, what is that I'm actually taking this. So these are nothing but integer data type. Okay. So I need to return the integer data type. Okay. So int, now it will ask you for the return type. Okay. Now you see add return type. It's like return C is equals to A plus B. Okay. So what we are trying to do is like, we are calling this method and we are performing some action and we are returning. But where do I print this value now? I want to see the value of C because you have performed some actions like some operations on them and I want to see the value of C. Where can I see this? So I can use here. Okay, I can call them and use this statement. That's nothing but print system.out.println and here method dot sum2. Okay, what it does is like during this method call, it will perform some action here. Okay, some operations are performed and it's going to return the value. But where do you need to print this value? See, this is like one option that we can do. Otherwise, what is that it's going to return? It's going to return C value. Okay, already we have C and I'm going to take it as like a result. Okay, there is another variable that I'm creating. I'm just storing that value. Okay, whatever value that I get as part of this operation will be stored inside this result. Now I'm going to print it. Okay, so let's see what is the output. We got only 4 here. I will get 5 values. Okay, now you see 30. Okay, sum2 what it is doing is like it's going to perform some set of operations and it's going to return. Okay, so this is nothing but a return type. You can put any return type. Okay, so for example, if you have some values which are like some float values, then what it is like you can return the float value. Okay, so whatever type of operations that you are performing here. Okay, so those operations will be done, and if you are specifying some return type, you have to return a value. Okay, if you are performing some actions like strings, there are string values, and if you want to return something, you can use the return type string and you can add this return. Okay, so now we look into the return. So here also I'm going to put it as like an int and it's going to add the return type. Okay, return C is equals to A minus B. Do the same thing. It is not required because we have already written this out here. Sub2. Got it? So yes, minus 10. So this is like with return type without parameters. Okay. So first is like without return type and without parameters. So here without return type and with parameters. With return type and without parameters. And finally we have one more thing, both. Okay, with return type, with parameters. How do I do it now? Just add int, comma, image. I will take the same thing here. But here what we need to do is like we need to pass the values. Okay, so we have to pass the values. So I'll just remove this. Now I'm passing values 200, 300. Here also I'm passing 400, 500. Okay, so here I'll write some piece of code that will be easy for you to understand. Okay, so here system out. This is without return type with params. See the output. Okay, without return type, without parameters, this is the value. Without return type and with parameters, and this is the value. With return type, without parameters, with return type and with parameters. Okay, so how do we call them? It's like we have different methods that we have created. Okay, so you can see void. If you are not returning anything, you can put it as like void. Here, if you are returning something, you can put it as like a data type. What is the data type that you want to return? And here, if you are passing the parameters, you have to give the parameters. Okay, number of parameters here. And here also, it is similar case. Now you see, here we are trying to return the value after performing some actions and accepting the parameters. So here we are accepting the values through the parameters and we are trying to perform some actions, and after that we are returning it. Okay. So like this, we can use the methods. Okay. What is the use of method? Method is like it contains a block of a code. Okay. And has the return type. Okay. It has the return type. Return type is like you have to definitely specify the return type. Okay. So access modifier. What is the syntax of writing the method? Access modifier, return type, and method name. Okay, with parameters or without parameters. That is all. Okay, so this is all about like methods. So now we saw these are like all non-static methods. Okay, all non-static methods. For example, if I'm defining something as like a static. Okay, so now you see, I'm going to write static methods. Only thing is like we are going to add the static event. Public static some static. Okay, now you see these are like members of this particular class. Okay, which are like non-static. Okay, which does not have any static value. Let me define some thing here internally. Is equals to some 300 into is equals to 400. Okay, and it's like C value. Is equals to. These are local variables. Okay, these are local variables. We already defined. I'm going to use 6. Otherwise, I'll take A plus B. Okay, now you see some static directly here before creating the object. I'm going to call it. I'll just execute C. Got it? What is the value of it? First is like here. This is the value. Okay. Now this is first executed and it's going to show the value. But what is the use of static method now? See, static method does not require any object to be created. Okay. Static method does not require any object to be created. Can I perform the same action in a non-static, like only in a static block? It is like a block that we are defining here. Now you see. So what is happening? Here you see. Okay, we can write this piece of code inside the static also. Okay, but now the question is like, let me just comment this. Oh, non-configuration. We did not get anything right. The reason is like we do not have main method. Okay. Earlier 1.6, like Java 1.6, they used to allow just like without any main method, we can execute the code. But after 1.7, Java 1.7, they stopped it. Okay. So we need to have the main method defined. Okay. So now main method is defined here. And the other thing is like, I did not create any object. Okay. I'm just commenting the code for the object. Whatever object that I've created, right, I'm going to comment it. So from here to here, I'll just comment the code, execute it, and see what is the outcome. We got static. So first it's going to execute this particular block, then after it's going to execute this method. Okay, we are calling it. So statics does not require any objects. Okay, so static does not require any objects. So the static members will be loaded during the class loading. Okay, so during the class loading. Are you clear with this, guys? So why do we need to use the static and what are the different types of methods that we can create?
Yes.
Okay. Now we'll see some basic examples of why do we need to use this static. Okay. So I'm going to take some employee. Now I'm going to find string rename string employee number string employee e-company. Okay, so let us take this particular employee is working for some Dell. Okay, so there could be like n number of employees, thousands of employees would be working for this particular company, right? So what I'm going to make it as like it is like static. Okay, so I'm making this variable as like a static variable. So now I'm going to create object and I want to display the details of the employees. What I'm going to do is like I'm going to use public void display. Okay, so what are the parameters that I'm accepting is like string ename, select ename, string e number. So here, this is like non-static. So what I need to do? I need to create an object. Okay, so let me copy this code, pasting it, name of the, this time I'm going to change as like employee. See what is that I want to take it as like, I'm just taking this like a parameters. Okay. Of ID, let us take it. Employee. I got it. What I need to do? Create a object for this class. emp is equals to emp dot display. So what is that? I need to enter employee. See here we have ename and e number. Okay, ename and e number. So I can directly assign these values with the help of like emp. So what I can do is like I can simply say that emp dot employee name equals to Srikanth. See what happens now in this case. What is that I'm getting here? Let me see. Srikanth, these are the two parameters I'm passing. And what is the parameter? What is the value that I'm getting as part of like static is like that. Okay. So this is like only one instance. For example, we are creating only object for this particular one employee. I need to create multiple employee details. For example, you see EMP1, EMP1, EMP1. So here some Chandu, 7. I'm just differentiating details of each and every employee with a particular statement. Okay. See what I did? So these are like 3 objects I have created. But see, static member will behave same for all the objects that we have created as part of class. Okay. So it will not change its behavior. See, Shrikant is working for Dell, Chandu is working for Dell, and Naga is working for Dell. Okay. So now you can see what are the details. Employee name, ID would be changing, but company remains same. So that is the reason why we made it as like a static. Okay. How do we call them? This is the method that I have created. Okay. So now it's like I'm just taking this as like a parameters and I'm just assigning this values here. Okay. So this is one way. The other way would be like still we can go ahead and we can create parameters within the when we are calling the method, when we are calling this particular method, right? So here itself, I'm just going to add them. For example, just selecting this. Rakesh. So these are the parameters, right? So I need to pass some values so that it can be taken as like a argument, like that's something, but here it's going to accept them. Okay. So this will be stored as part of e name and e number. So it can be 5, 6, 6, 7, 8. Okay. I go and execute. You get another employee details. So Rakesh, employee number, and done. What is constant and what are the things that we are changing? E name and e number is like changing. But what is a constant? This is like a static, which is not changing for each and every object. So that is the reason why we made it as like a static. Okay. So this is how we'll be creating the methods and use the static blocks and instance blocks. Okay. So static method. Now you see you don't want to create any sort of object for this, right? Directly we can create public static void. Okay. So here you need not to use this. So directly you can call them without any object. When executed, see what happened? Static methods are called without object. Okay. Okay, guys, I'll stop it for today here. So still we have few things that we need to discuss. So we discussed about what is instance blocks and variables, and we discussed about static variables, methods and blocks, and we'll discuss about like how do we use them in nested classes.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Let's meet tomorrow. I'm going to share this classes like whatever we have discussed, right? So I'm going to share this classes with you. I mean, like all the programs. Thanks for your time, guys. Let's meet tomorrow. Bye.